There's a smell that clings to some places. Not just the scent of stale ale or polish, but something deeper, colder. It's the smell of forgotten time, of whispers trapped in ancient wood, of a presence that never quite left. Imagine stepping into an old British pub, the warmth of the fire struggling against an unnatural chill that seems to cling to your spine. You're alone, or almost alone, after hours. The last clatter of the optics has faded, the cleaning done, the doors locked. And then, from the darkest corner of the tap room, you hear it, a low, wet gasp, almost a sob, followed by the distinct clink of a glass being set down on a scarred oak table. But there's no one there. The glass shimmers, still wet with condensation, in a patch of profound cold. And then, a perfect, clear imprint of a hand appears on the dusty surface of the bar, slowly fading, as if pressed there by a hand that was never quite solid. It's a detail that chills you to the bone, isn't it? That lingering, physical impression of something incorporeal. We spend so much time in these places, these social hubs, these bastions of comfort and camaraderie. But what if they're also something else entirely? What if the very fabric of these ancient establishments is soaked not just in spilled beer and generations of laughter, but in something far darker, something that refuses to be forgotten? By the end of this journey tonight, you'll understand why these seemingly innocuous public houses are, in fact, the perfect engines for lingering terror. Welcome to the Unveiled Darkness Podcast. I'm your host, and if you're new here, this is the place where we go deep into the stories that don't quite add up, the cases that got buried, the legends that refuse to die, and the darkness that keeps finding its way back to the surface. If that sounds like your kind of night, hit subscribe and make yourself comfortable. We're just getting started. Now, where were we? We're talking about pubs. Not just any pubs, but the kind with centuries of history etched into their very foundations. The kind where the floorboards groan underfoot with the weight of generations, where the flickering gaslights, or their modern electric equivalents, cast long, dancing shadows that seem to stretch and contort into impossible shapes. These aren't just buildings, they're living, breathing entities, silent witnesses to countless lives, loves, betrayals, and deaths. Think about it for a moment. A pub, at its core, is a place of convergence. People gather there to celebrate, to mourn, to conspire, to escape. They bring with them their joys, their sorrows, their secrets, and sometimes their very lifeblood. For centuries, pubs have served as the unofficial community centers, coaching inns, temporary hospitals, even morgues during times of plague or war. The sheer volume of human emotion, of raw, unfiltered existence funneled through these spaces is staggering. One such place, a particularly potent example, stands in a quiet, winding lane in the heart of rural Warwickshire. It's called the Old Bell. Not just old, but ancient. Its origins trace back to the 14th century, a coaching inn that saw kings and commoners, soldiers and highwaymen pass through its heavy oak doors. The exterior is a picturesque postcard, timber-framed, whitewashed walls, a thatched roof, hanging baskets overflowing with geraniums. But step inside and a different story begins to unfold. The air is always just a little cooler, particularly in the snug at the back, furthest from the roaring fireplace. The scent is a mix of hops, wood smoke, and something else. Something metallic and faintly sweet, like old dried blood, though you'd never quite put your finger on it.
The current landlord, a burly man named Arthur, who's seen more than his fair share of late-night strangeness, told me a story about his first week there. He was alone, late one Tuesday, cleaning up. The kind of quiet where you can hear the settling of the building, the creak of old bones. He heard a soft, rhythmic humming coming from the top of the cellar stairs, a low, melancholy tune. Thinking it was his wife, already in bed, he called out. Nothing. He went to investigate, flashlight in hand. The humming stopped abruptly just as he reached the cellar door. He peered down into the gloom, the air growing noticeably colder, heavier. Nothing. He swore he could smell lavender, strong and sickly sweet, where before there had been only damp earth and beer fumes. He dismissed it as tiredness, a trick of the old building. But that was just the very first whisper. It was the first time the walls, having been silent for a new pair of ears, decided to clear their throat. But why do these specific places, these seemingly ordinary pubs, hold on to such vivid, unsettling energies? What makes them such perfect prisons for the departed, or perhaps such compelling stages for their continued existence? That's our first curiosity loop, isn't it? Why are these particular pubs, like the Old Bell, so actively haunted, so steeped in the paranormal? We'll begin to unravel that as we delve deeper into their secrets. Arthur's lavender-scented humming was just the prelude. Like a shy performer testing the acoustics, the unseen residents of the Old Bell began to make their presence known with increasing confidence. The early signs were subtle, easily explained away by the skeptical mind. A glass that moved ever so slightly across the bar while Arthur's back was turned. A sudden drop in temperature in the corner of the public bar, a chill so profound it made breath visibly mist, even on a warm summer evening. Then came the sounds. Not just the creaks and groans of an ancient building settling, but distinct, impossible noises. The gentle clatter of unseen skittles being bowled in the function room when it was empty. The murmur of conversations just beyond the edge of audibility from the upstairs private rooms, even when the entire building was vacant. One evening, a regular named Malcolm, who had frequented the Old Bell for 50 years, swore he saw a man in a dark, old-fashioned uniform sitting alone at a table near the fireplace. Malcolm, being a friendly sort, nodded a greeting. The man simply stared into his empty tankard, then slowly, deliberately, turned his head to face the roaring fire, and simply dissolved, vanished into the flickering light, leaving behind only the lingering scent of damp wall and a profound, bone-deep cold in his wake. Malcolm, a man who had faced down rowdy patrons and even a charging bull in his youth, swore off ale for 3 days. He described the man's uniform as that of a Civil War soldier, a pikeman perhaps, or a musketeer. He remembered the haunted look in his eyes, a weariness that transcended mere human exhaustion. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Old Bell, like many pubs of its age, sits on a ley line, a theory many paranormal enthusiasts believe serves as a kind of energetic highway for spirits. It also stands on ground that has seen more than its share of conflict. During the English Civil War, skirmishes were common in the surrounding fields. The pub itself served as a temporary field hospital for both parliamentarians and royalists. The very timbers of the building had soaked up the fear, the pain, the last breaths of dying men. This historical context provides a chilling backdrop. It's one thing to hear a bump in the night.
It's another entirely when that bump is accompanied by the scent of lavender from a heartbroken woman, or the phantom glimpse of a soldier still fighting a forgotten war. These aren't just residual energies, echoes playing out on a loop. There is an intelligence here, a distinct personality. The soldier in the uniform seemed to react to Malcolm, however subtly. This brings us to our second curiosity loop. What are these entities, these lingering presences, trying to communicate? Are they trapped, replaying their final moments, or are they attempting to reach across the veil, perhaps seeking solace or even something more unsettling? The slow creeping dread comes from the realization that they aren't just phantoms, but something more, something that sees you. Arthur, despite his initial skepticism, couldn't ignore the mounting evidence, the stories from regulars, the inexplicable phenomena that became harder and harder to dismiss. He started to delve into the pub's history, spending late nights poring over dusty parish records and local archives. What he uncovered only deepened the unsettling feeling. The humming, lavender-scented presence? Records showed a young woman named Eleanor, a barmaid at the Old Bell in the late 17th century, who tragically died of a sudden fever in one of the upstairs rooms. She was known for her beautiful singing and her penchant for lavender. Her fiancé, a local farmer, had been killed in a skirmish just weeks before. She died heartbroken in the very room that now serves as Arthur's private living quarters. The humming was often heard most clearly near the old rocking chair, a relic that had been in the pub for centuries, perhaps even sat in by Eleanor herself. The Civil War soldier wasn't just a generic uniform. Local lore spoke of a Captain John Thorne, a royalist officer who was ambushed and mortally wounded just outside the Old Bell during a skirmish in 1645. He was dragged inside into the public bar, where he slowly bled out, his last moments spent staring into the roaring fireplace, reportedly muttering about betrayal. He's the regular who never left, eternally replaying his final moments of despair. Arthur began to document everything, the specific times of events, the temperature fluctuations, the eyewitness accounts. He noticed patterns. The humming was most prominent on clear nights, especially around midnight. The soldier, Captain Thorne, seemed to appear most often when the pub was quiet, nearing closing, as if he preferred the solitude to relieve his torment. One night, Arthur was cleaning the beer lines in the cellar. He heard a soft rustling sound, like silk brushing against stone from the darkest corner. He shone his flashlight, expecting a rat, but saw nothing. Yet the air grew incredibly heavy, and the scent of expensive perfume, old and cloying, filled the small space. He felt a distinct, gentle tug on the bottom of his trousers, as if a child were trying to get his attention. He froze, heart hammering against his ribs. He knew about the Lady in Grey, a recurring figure in the pub's lore, a woman of wealth whose carriage had overturned just outside the inn in the early 1800s. She had been brought into the cellar, the coolest place, where she slowly succumbed to her injuries. Her young daughter, who had been traveling with her, was orphaned and never recovered from the trauma, reportedly often sneaking back to the pub to try and find her mother. Was the gentle tug the mother, or the lost child? This expansion of the narrative brings us to another layer of dread. These aren't just generic ghosts, they're specific individuals with specific histories, specific traumas, and they are active.
They are making themselves known, not just to Arthur, but to anyone who pays close enough attention. Are you still with me? Can you feel the weight of these stories pressing in, the centuries of human experience bleeding through the walls? Think about the pubs you know, the ones with history, the ones with a character. What do you think might be lingering there, just out of sight, just beyond the reach of rational explanation? It forces us to ask, what happens when these lingering presences, these echoes of the past, decide they've been ignored long enough? What happens when their attempts at communication escalate from a gentle tug to something far more insistent, far more terrifying? The escalation was slow, insidious. What began as a series of strange occurrences gradually morphed into something more sinister, more aggressive. The playful poltergeist activities, if they could even be called that, took on a distinct malevolence. Glasses didn't just slide, they shattered spontaneously, spraying shards across the bar, leaving a lingering smell of ozone. The temperature drops became more extreme, localized pockets of icy air that felt like a clammy hand on your neck. The murmurs became distinct whispers, sometimes forming words. Arthur heard his name called out late at night, a low, guttural voice seeming to emanate from the very timbers of the building. He'd hear Eleanor's humming turn into a keening wail, a sound of profound despair that echoed through the empty pub, raising the hairs on his arms. Captain Thorne's appearances became more frequent, more solid. Malcolm, the regular, swore he saw the soldier standing directly behind another patron, his spectral hand reaching out, almost touching the man's shoulder, a look of pure anguish on his ghostly face. The other patron, blissfully unaware, continued to sip his pint. It was a terrifying vision of two realities occupying the same space, with only a select few privy to the horror. The most alarming development concerned the Lady in Grey and her child. The gentle tug on Arthur's trousers in the cellar was replaced by a palpable shove. He stumbled, catching himself on a barrel, and heard a child's plaintive cry echo from the darkness. He refused to go into the cellar alone after that. Patrons complained of an overwhelming scent of sickly sweet perfume pervading the women's toilets, accompanied by the feeling of unseen fingers brushing their hair. One young woman, emergent from the toilet, was visibly shaken, claiming she saw a small, pale face peering at her from the gap under the stall door. Here's what we know so far. The Old Bell is not just a pub, it's a historical tapestry woven with tragedy and unresolved emotion. We have Eleanor, the heartbroken barmaid, Captain Thorne, the betrayed soldier, and the Lady in Grey with her lost child. Their individual stories are clear, but their combined presence seems to create a vortex of paranormal activity, one that is becoming increasingly assertive. The turning point came one bitterly cold November night.
Arthur had closed up, secured all the doors, and was making his way upstairs to bed. He reached the landing, and that's when he heard it. Not a whisper, not a hum, but a clear, anguished scream that tore through the silence of the old building. It was coming from Eleanor's old room, his bedroom. He hesitated, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He knew his wife was visiting her sister. He was alone. He gripped the banister, knuckles white, the wood feeling strangely slick under his touch. The scream was followed by a crash, the sound of glass shattering, then a heavy thud. He stood there, frozen, his breath fogging in the sudden, inexplicable chill of the upstairs hallway. He had to go in.
He had to face whatever was waiting in his room. What was truly triggering this intense, terrifying outburst? That's our third curiosity loop. Is it simply residual energy? Or is there a more malevolent intelligence at play, one that has decided to make its presence undeniable? Arthur pushed open the bedroom door slowly, the ancient wood groaning a protest that sounded almost like a tortured moan. The air inside was frigid, tasting metallic and thick, like copper pennies held in a child's sweaty palm. Frost patterns bloomed on the inside of the window panes, though it wasn't freezing outside. His eyes struggled to adjust to the gloom, lit only by the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the heavy curtains. The room was in disarray. His dresser drawers were pulled open, clothes strewn across the floor. A framed photograph of his wife lay shattered on the bedside table, the glass cracked like an icy spiderweb. And then he saw it. In the center of the room, by the old rocking chair, stood a figure. It was indistinct at first, a shifting, translucent mist, but as Arthur watched, horrified, it solidified. It was Eleanor, but not the gentle, humming spirit of lore. This Eleanor was twisted, her face contorted into a mask of pure agony, eyes wide and black, mouth open in a silent scream. Her dress, once described as a simple linen frock, now hung in tatters, covered in what looked like dark, congealed blood. A profound wave of despair washed over Arthur, so intense it made his knees buckle. It wasn't just sadness, it was the crushing weight of utter, irredeemable heartbreak. He could feel her pain, raw and searing, as if it were his own. The scent of lavender was overpowering, but now it was sickly sweet, almost suffocating, mixed with that faint metallic tang. Then, slowly, her head turned. Her eyes, those vacant black holes, fixed on Arthur, and the silent scream found its voice. It was not a human sound. It was a high-pitched, guttural shriek that seemed to vibrate through his very bones, threatening to tear him apart from the inside out. He clammed his hands over his ears, but the sound bypassed his eardrums, echoing directly in his skull. As the shriek reached its crescendo, the figure lunged, not physically, but in a horrific, disorienting blur of motion. Arthur felt a searing, unimaginable cold slam into his chest, knocking the air from his lungs. He stumbled back, hitting the doorframe with a sickening thud, dropping his flashlight. It rolled away, plunging the room into near-total darkness, save for the weak street lamp outside. He saw Eleanor's face, inches from his own, her features dissolving and reforming, flickering like a dying flame. Her mouth opened wider, impossibly wide, and he felt a pressure, as if something was trying to be pulled out of him, something essential. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. He was paralyzed, caught in the grip of a terror that transcended anything he'd ever known. This wasn't an echo. This wasn't a replay. This was a direct, intelligent assault. The sheer malevolence radiating from Eleanor was overwhelming. It felt as though centuries of trapped anguish had finally curdled into a concentrated venom, and Arthur was its unfortunate target. He was experiencing the full, unbridled fury of a spirit that had been denied peace for too long. He felt himself losing consciousness, the edges of his vision darkening.
The last thing he remembered was the chilling scent of lavender and the pressure of spectral hands on his chest, pressing, as if trying to force something from his very soul. What was it that the entity truly desired in that moment of terror? What was its ultimate goal in that terrifying encounter? That's our fourth curiosity loop.
Was it merely an act of anguish, or something far more predatory, far more demanding? Arthur woke up in the hallway, sprawled on the floor, the cold seeping into his bones. His chest ached, not from a physical blow, but from a profound emptiness, a hollow void where the searing cold had been. The room was no longer freezing. The frost on the windows was gone. The shattered photo frame was still there, but the clothes strewn on the floor looked like they had simply fallen rather than been violently tossed. Everything was eerily quiet. Too quiet. He stumbled downstairs, hands shaking too much to even consider making tea. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he had experienced something beyond the realm of normal. The fear remained, a cold knot in his stomach, but beneath it was a strange sense of exhaustion, as if he had run a marathon while asleep. He sold the old bell 3 months later. Couldn't bring himself to stay. The weight of centuries, of lingering despair, was too much. He told new potential buyers vague stories of old building quirks and drafts, but never the full truth. The pub changed hands, of course. New landlords came and went. Some heard whispers, some felt chills, but none, to Arthur's knowledge, ever experienced the full, unadulterated fury he had faced that night. Eleanor's presence seemed to recede, becoming once again the quiet hum, the subtle scent of lavender. But the memory lingered. For Arthur, the pub was forever scarred, a wound in time that refused to fully heal. The feeling of something being taken from him never quite left. So, to recap, we started with a subtle manifestation, the mere smell of lavender or the sight of a fleeting uniform. These escalated to more distinct sounds, physical touches, and finally to a direct, terrifying confrontation where a spirit's anguish became physically palpable. The question isn't whether these places are haunted, but how profoundly and intimately these hauntings can impact the living. What kind of residue, what kind of imprint is left behind in a person after such an encounter? The old bell still stands, still welcomes patrons. But if you sit in the snug or pass by the rocking chair, you might still feel that inexplicable chill or catch a faint, sweet scent of lavender. The feeling of being watched, of something just beyond the periphery of your vision, persists. The current landlord, a young, jovial man, laughs off the ghost stories, but admits the beer lines sometimes mysteriously clog, and he often finds the cellar door ajar, even when he remembers locking it. The profound mystery for Arthur and for us is why that particular night, that specific scream, that lunge. Why then? Was there an unseen trigger, a convergence of energies, or a sudden, unbearable surge of pain from Eleanor's long-suffering spirit? That's our fifth curiosity loop. What was the exact catalyst for such a violent and deeply personal manifestation? And what does it tell us about the nature of these trapped entities? The story of the old bell, with its resident phantoms of Eleanor, Captain Thorne, and the Lady in Grey, isn't unique. It's a microcosm of countless stories from pubs across the UK and indeed around the world. These buildings, steeped in centuries of human experience, become conduits, collectors, and sometimes prisons for the restless dead. The very architecture, the ancient materials, the deep-rooted sense of community, and the high emotional traffic all converge to make them perfect haunting engines. Think of the layers of energy, the stone foundations absorbing the echoes of ancient footsteps, the wooden beams vibrating with centuries of laughter and tears, the cellars, cool and dark, witnessing secrets and sorrows. The fireplace, a focal point for countless conversations, confessions, and farewells. Every spilled pint, every argument, every passionate kiss, every whispered secret, every last breath. They all leave an indelible mark. And sometimes those marks coalesce into something tangible, something sentient, something that refuses to acknowledge the passage of time. These entities, whether residual echoes or intelligent presences, are the ultimate regulars. They've seen generations come and go, yet they remain,
tied to the familiar comforts, or perhaps the familiar torments of their chosen establishment. They are the spectral landlords, the ghostly soldiers, the heartbroken barmaids, forever serving their shifts in the afterlife or endlessly replaying the moments that trapped them. The true horror isn't just the jump scare, the fleeting glimpse, or the sudden chill. It's the creeping dread of knowing that these places, these pillars of local life, are not empty when the lights go out. They are teeming. They are alive with a different kind of life, a life that exists just beyond our perception, waiting for the right moment, the right set of ears to make itself known. Arthur left the old bell with a piece of his soul feeling lighter, as if something had been siphoned off. He never quite regained his robust, jovial nature. He's a haunted man, not by an external ghost, but by the memory of a ghost that reached out and touched him and took something with it. Are you still with me? Can you feel the chill of that thought? The idea that something can literally draw energy from you? The lingering question, the one that truly keeps me up at night, is this. If the walls of these ancient pubs could truly talk, if they could scream the unfiltered truths of all they've witnessed, what truly imaginable horrors would they reveal? And given all we've discussed tonight, what deep, dark secrets might your own local pub's ancient walls be holding on to, perhaps waiting for you to walk in alone one quiet night? That's our final curiosity loop, one that I can't answer for you, but one you might feel compelled to explore on your own. The stories we tell tonight are just the surface of what lurks in the shadows of these cherished old establishments. I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced anything inexplicable in a pub, a bar, or any other place steeped in history? Share your tales in the comments below. Your story might just be the next one we unravel. If the deep dive into the unseen and the unsettling is your kind of late-night companion, then hit that subscribe button and join our growing community here on the Unveiled Darkness. We're just scratching the surface of the terrifying truths that lie hidden in plain sight. Next time, we'll be exploring the chilling disappearances along the ancient Roman roads of Britain, places where travelers seem to step off the map and into another dimension entirely. Until then, keep your eyes open, your ears tuned to the whispers, and remember, some regulars truly never leave. Good night.